this episode, we want to talk about our favorite moments of Paul Di'Anno in Iron Maiden. As we know, we recently lost Paul. He was an important part of the band. Obviously, Iron Maiden wouldn't be where they are had it not been for Paul's participation in that band over the course of those first two records, which are monumental albums in the history of heavy metal. I think, most metal fans will agree that those records are great, and most Maiden fans love them. So many classics on those records. I know for me, I first got acquainted with Paul's era of Maiden. I'd already known who Iron Maiden was. I knew about Number of the Beast. I'd seen Run to the Hills, and then for whatever MTV would do their concerts on. I think it was Saturday nights or something, 11 o'clock, and the one week they had it was Iron Maiden, and it was going to be Iron Maiden, and it was Sabbath and Dio. I think you get 15 minutes of Sabbath and 15 minutes of Dio, and then they did a half an hour Maiden, which was footage with them with Paul singing, which I didn't know they had a different singer other than Bruce. So at the time, so I just thought it was really cool. I mean, I can remember Paul. He just looked really cool. I mean, he had you could still see the video out there on YouTube. It's all black, the black
Yeah.
pants and he had the black button down with the gauntlets on and the studded belt, and he just had a swagger about him that was cool. You know, Paul had a unique voice. I think in the history of Maiden, we could debate who the better singer was, or could
Yeah.
Paul have done this, or Paul could have done that. It doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because Paul did what he did. He brought his unique take, his style to Maiden, those first records, like have a raw energy and an emotion to them that um, I think in large part the record succeeded because of what Paul brought at that time. What do you think, Mike?
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, every band has a starting point and goes through growing pains, and to establish Iron Maiden, Paul Diano had to be there. I mean, that was the piece of the puzzle that was needed at that time. Um, I know that a lot of people will compare Dickinson's era to Diano's rather short era, and I'm with you. I didn't know of Paul Diano until after we had gotten into Number of the Beast and things like that, and some of the kids that were older in school were like, "Oh, you got to listen to Killers. You think Number of the Beast is good? Wait till you hear this." And that's when I found out, oh, okay. Like you said, some bands have different singers at points. Um, as the years went on and my appreciation for those two albums grew, I kind of came to the realization, at least for me, that there really wasn't that big of a gap between Deano and Dickinson, like some people like to assume there is.
Mm-hmm.
I think Deano should get more credit, almost being a crooner. I mean, his voice carried it's very melodic through so many songs on those first two albums. Where I know a lot of people think he's, that gruff, gravelly, almost punk kind of singer for those first two records, but I kind of differ on that a little bit. I think he sings just as much as Dickinson does, with a lot of melody, with a lot of heart and emotion too.
Yeah, there's a ton of emotion, I think, in his voice, and there's a lot of moments where there are quieter moments on those records, and we'll talk about some of them in some of the songs. But he definitely had a good singing voice and could do things that people, you know, will point to Dickinson and talk about the notes that he can hit. But I mean, Deano at times was able to do certain things with his voice that are, he could hit high notes, and he could
Absolutely.
he could do like a soft, like you said, like a more croony emotional part, and he
Yeah.
could be rough and tumble. And I actually think the punk thing with Maiden is a little bit, that whole angle's a little bit overblown. I think it's just because that first album is more raw sounding. You could definitely hear the punk influence in. I was listening to a few songs in preparation for this episode, and I was listening to Invasion
Yeah.
um, from the Soundhouse tapes, and that's definitely has like punk,
Yeah.
a punk vibe to it. A very cool song, uh, I think. But that's I don't really hear that as much on now. I'm more of a I've always been more of a metalhead than a punk guy. So,
Hmm.
but there's some of that there. But I think like you said, I think the the punk thing is a little bit, that thing is a little bit over, it's a little bit more stressed when it comes to Deano than the fact that he actually like did some really cool things with his voice on those records. It's just, we'll never know what happened. It's a shame like they couldn't with some bands, unfortunately, with some people live harder lives, and Paul lived a hard life.
Yeah,
Um and he was never quite able to capture, you know, he never caught that lightning in a bottle again. And
right.
but what he did is is immortal. Like
Absolutely.
he
Absolutely.
those records are all time all time classics, so we're
Yeah.
always going to remember him.
Yeah.
And we want to talk about our top five favorite Paul Diano era songs.
Yep.
You want to start?
Yeah, I can definitely start. Wrathchild was probably the first, if I remember back then, was I think the first Deano era song I heard. So that one always has stuck with me. Yeah, there we go, right on the Killers album. So, and just outside of Deano's voice and everything on there too, it's just the whole band is firing on all cylinders on that one, and Harris on the bass. But Paul delivers a stellar performance on Wrathchild.
Yeah, it's a great song. My number five for me is and it's funny because I had this on cassette back in the day. This song was on the cassette of Killers, and I didn't even realize that it wasn't initially on the track listing until years later. I bought the a reissue of Killers, and I'm like, where the fuck is Twilight Zone? And
I think
so
we
I
were
had to go
talking
out and
about this. Yeah.
I went out and had to buy this. So there it is. I mean, Twilight Zone. I
Yeah.
because I always loved Twilight Zone. And I really
Sure.
miss it in the context of the record.
Yeah.
I think he does some really cool stuff in here. Like I was just saying before, some of the notes he hits in here are like super high.
Right. Right.
Like, and it's just a cool song. It just moves along
Yep.
at it. It got a good tempo to it, and I dig the vocal line to it. I think it's great. That chorus is phenomenal.
Yeah.
So yeah, Twilight Zone is number five for me.
It's a good one. My number four is Murders in the Rue Morgue, and I just love Paul's delivery across the chorus on that one. It just comes off so Murders in the Rue Morgue. You can just feel that intensity.
Yeah,
It's again, those first two Maiden records, composition wise, were a little bit, you know, different from what we would come to know in the Dickinson era. But Murders in the Rue Morgue, that was another one that struck me right away.
yeah. There's a lot of atmosphere in that song.
Yeah,
That's a phenomenal song. Let me see. Number four. So number four for me is was number five for you, and that is Wrathchild
yeah,
from Killers. This was actually probably the first thing I heard from that era of Maiden, and it was on that. It was in that concert that I saw on MTV, and in fact, I can remember seeing the in the lead up to the MTV would have commercials, but in the MTV concerts,
hmm
this week will be this, and they showed a little clip of Maiden playing, and they were showing Paul like part of it was him singing Wrathchild, and seeing that song like impressed the hell out of me.
yeah,
In that, it's a really great song. I mean, I just it's a cool story.
yep,
It's got a lot of attitude in it.
right,
Total like once you know that era with Deano and what he brings, like it just totally fits like the character
yeah,
of
oh yeah,
that he brought. So great song. Wrathchild is number four for me.
yep. Number three, I'm going with the title track of the very first album, Iron Maiden. I mean, there's not a whole lot you can really say about this. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Again, an awesome delivery from Paul Diano singing about, the Iron Maiden title track there. It's legendary.
Yeah, still to this day in the set list. I mean, an
Yep,
all-time classic. I mean,
absolutely.
you got it. It'd be weird not to hear the band playing it. It's a great song.
Yep.
Totally good one.
What do you got lined
Um,
up?
the next one for me is, and I'm actually going with the live version of this one, but this was actually, I actually had this before I had the first two records, and this is the Made in
Yeah.
Japan EP. This was the first thing I owned that Paul sings on, and for me on here, I love the version of Remember Tomorrow on
Yeah.
here, even though Paul screws up the lyrics. The second verse, the last two lines, like he sings, re-sings the first verse.
Yeah.
Um, but I just there's just something about it. It's the it's over the part of it that I really like is when it comes to the after when he sings the verse and he comes into the when it comes to the doom doom doom
Yeah.
doom doom doom, he's doing that instead of like on the record where it's focused on that like live. He's doing that
Yeah. Yep.
like I just think it's really cool, and that's what makes that version of the song for me emotional, moody song. Super heavy on the
Yeah.
choruses. Great song, great one of his best moments ever, and
That's
this version I love.
and you I like that's my number two. So yeah, and I think when we are talking about him being a crooner, you can listen to the studio version of that where he's that's where like the heartfelt emotion builds up on that song.
Yeah,
And I almost put that at number one, but I'll get to my number one later. But yeah, and I think most people that's like Deano's namesake song, "Remember Tomorrow." I think that's the one that's listed with Paul Deano the most with most fans. But yeah, that live version's pretty bunch of big ripper too.
yeah, it's a smoker. Let's see. Then going to the debut. This is a track that actually like I always liked this song, but it really became more of a favorite. Like I'm gonna say damn within the last 6 or 7 years, even like just vaulted into how I felt about it, and that is Charlotte the Harlot.
Uh,
Um,
Almost made my
I
list. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a killer song, and I don't know what I was missing before that. I don't know if it's because at one point we were thinking about doing a cover of it, and I listened to it so much to try to get a feel, but I just love the flow of that song. Um, I love the riffing in it, and I love that. I love what Paul does in the middle part. Again, we can go back to he the verses and stuff. He's driving, and it's raw, and then you come in this middle section, he gets like super tender and emotional, and but I just think there's so much cool stuff about that song.
Yeah.
That verse riff is awesome, and I love the energy of the chorus, and then there's nothing I don't love
Yeah.
about Charlotte the Harlot.
Yeah. That's a great song. That one and Women in Uniform are kind of
Yeah,
back and forth, if I was going to put it on. But so that brings me to number one. And where people think Remember Tomorrow is synonymous with Deano, for me, it's Prodigal Son. Absolutely love that song. The tone in his voice has always stuck out to me and is on that one. And years later, I came back to that song and I could be the only person on the planet Earth that thinks this, but I heard so much Prodigal Son when Testament put out Return to Serenity. It just I saw to me Chuck Billy was channeling that era of Paul Diano through that song. And I had always liked that song up to that point, but then after Testament released that song, I was like, man, it just drove it that home that much more for me, how much I love Prodigal Son. So that is
nice,
my all-time favorite Paul Diano track.
great, that's awesome. It's all of these songs. There are so many good ones. It's really hard to narrow down this list of top five, but for me, at number one, it's always going to be from this era is Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, just again, everything about that song. I just love the first of all the riff is really cool, and I really love the tempo to it. It has the energy to it is off the charts, and the double guitar work is great, and that whole um the ups and downs in the middle section, like for years we would play this from time to time at shows as a cover, and it always went down super well, and it was always so much fun to play, and just that I never ever get bored of it,
yeah,
of that song. It's like it's one of the songs off the first few records that I think hints at some of the more epic sounding kind
yep,
of stuff
yeah,
that come, but also totally fitting for this era of the band.
yeah.
Um, So
It,
yeah, number one for me, Phantom the Opera. I just freaking love that song.
it's
I probably
crazy
could.
that, it's there's only a small, amount of work, that to pick from for Deano. And this list could change to if you were to ask me this again tomorrow, I'd probably give you five different songs. Who knows? Because the more and more you listen to it, and I was leading up to this too, I was listening to both albums quite a bit. And I'm a little on the heavy on the Killer side of things, but tomorrow I might pick a whole bunch of different ones. So,
Yeah, same. Yeah, other than it's hard for me to picture Phantom not being in my top five or Remember Tomorrow, but there's songs like my initial list, I had Killers
hmm
in the list. I
great
love
song.
that.
Yeah.
The build into that song is tremendous, and then when it finally kicks in is awesome. And
Oh, it
then
kicks in at double
also,
time. Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, it's and then also for me, one that almost made the list that I've always thought was a lot of fun, um, is Running Free. I
I
think
was just gonna say that. Yeah.
it's just such a good song, and I remember seeing when I saw Made in '85 and they played that, with Bruce singing it, but it was just such a fun song in the crowd. And I maybe like played that song more than I played it so much. It was one of those ones that I rewound
Yep.
a lot. Like it's
Yeah.
just an amazing song. There's so
Yeah.
many amazing songs. Prowler's great and Prodigal
Yep.
Son is great. And
Yeah.
Transylvania and it's for an
Another one.
instrumental. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not going to list that when we're talking about Deano, but
No, no, but still.
Transylvania is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But song
Ides of
after song.
March. Yeah. I know.
And
I know. Yeah. I mean, there's really no wrong, answer to what's the best Diano era song because they all stand out on their own merit and they're all very, very good. And it's very hard because, you had two albums, a live EP and a couple of B-sides here and there. It's not a whole lot to work with there when you're talking about his best work and that small amount of songs.
yeah, imagine that though, that just to put into perspective that with everything else is that here's a guy that and a band that over the course of, let's just look at these first two records and the EP and those couple of singles, like just in that, like there are bands that go their whole career
Right.
and don't have like it seems like so little to pick from, but at the same time, it's like every song
Yeah.
is is that amount of work. Like a band would be, I would give my eye teeth to at the end of my day be able to look back and have that number of songs like
Right.
be that immortal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is too. He was truly a talent. And I remember, once we were acquainted with Deano, the next, I know I can't remember which one came first, but I remember that, did you guys have Z-Rock down in Pittsburgh when that was real big?
I grew up in Eastern Pennsylvania, so I did not have that.
Okay. Z-Rock came out of Des Plaines, Illinois for us, and it was broadcast over, 1035 on the FM up here. But when Battlezone came out, they played that heavily, and we were really into it. We thought it was really, really good. I mean, it didn't have the Iron Maiden vibe. I mean, it had a little bit of that flavor of the day thing, but it was still really heavy and really good. And I thought, oh, hey, this is going to take off. We might get a couple good albums out of them. And I think there was two Battlezone albums, if I
Mm-hmm.
remember correctly, and then it kind of, went its own way. But and then I know he had the Deano project too, which that was a little more AOR sounding. I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm grabbing at the right words for that. So it was good, but again, wasn't what I was expecting.
Yeah, and he
So
came back with that Killers, that Menace to
yeah.
Society record, which was it was okay. I think he was trying for a heavier kind of vibe. And
hmm
that one of the oddities too that came out at the time was I don't have it anymore, but I did have this Praying Mantis live thing that I think maybe Metal Blade put it out. It was a live recording of Praying Mantis, but Paul was on it and Dennis Stratton
Oh,
played
okay, okay,
played a guitar on it too. So I think it was a mix of Praying Mantis, but there was a lot of Maiden stuff on there. And
okay.
Paul, I don't know. I after the Maiden stuff, I kind of I have to read his book one of these days. I was just listening to Talk Louder, and
I watched that one too.
yeah, they're talking about the book, and I'm kind of hesitant to read it because he said that if you read it, like you might get a different, Paul comes across a certain way in the book. But I would like
Yeah.
to read it.
He said it was a difficult read too. It wasn't a
Yeah,
real easy book to get through.
yeah, but there's some of those years I'm not as well acquainted with, and I don't know what happened with it's without knowing things that happened in his career. I don't know if Paul, unfortunately, was someone that would shoot himself in the foot. It seems like I thought, would have thought, I remember seeing the Battle Zone records and um, thought he could have built some, but it seemed like he would like put a few things out and then you wouldn't hear
Yeah.
anything for years. And then something would come out and then it would go
Yeah.
quiet for a long time. But he gave us such great work even over the course of those records.
Yeah,
And
small catalog of work, but a mighty one. I mean, there's no weak spots in any of it.
yeah, it's super influential
Yeah.
too. I mean, um, in not just in his vocals, but also I think like you could see, I think some of Paul's attitude and even like down to the way that he carried himself and dressed and things like that. I mean, I
Right.
think was influential on metal
Oh
too.
yeah.
So
There's no question.
yeah,
Like you were saying earlier too, the first time you saw him, it's, black leather all the way down, and he was a ferocious frontman too. He had that more aggressive kind of approach compared to when Dickinson was in the band. He's a strong frontman, but Deanna always came across as a little bit more aggressive up on the stage.
yeah. Deano. I guess the best way to describe the difference between Deano and Dickinson is Dickinson is a great frontman, but also more. He's a theatrical, play to the back row.
Yes.
No matter where you are, larger than life. Every movement is gigantic, theatrical, and Paul is street man. I
Yeah.
mean, he's like an aggressive, like man of the people
Yeah.
kind of front man, and both of them are great.
Did you ever get to see Deanna live?
I didn't. I
I
did.
didn't either.
I missed them. Icarus Witch toured with him and had served as his opening band, and then they would take a break and then go on and back him
That's right. Okay.
live. And I just never. I didn't get to see that, and I don't remember if he's come to Pittsburgh since. Maybe he was here a couple times, but it was, I don't know if I would have had the heart in later years. It's tough to watch, um, musicians that you really admire going through
Yeah.
hard times, and he
Yeah.
had he definitely had it hard, and you know, some of his singing suffered, and it was sad to watch, but I never
Yeah.
did get to see him. I'm glad he got to make amends with,
With
he and
Maiden.
Harris
Yeah.
got to meet up and he and Bruce finally met.
That
And
was cool. Yeah.
so definitely
Yeah.
cool.
Well, there you have it. There's our top five Paul Diano songs in honor and tribute to the late great Paul Diano.
If you like what you saw here, hit the like. Make sure you comment. Let us know what you thought. Let us know what you think of Paul Diano and we want to see what your five favorite songs are.
Drop your lists in the
Subscribe.
comment.
Yeah, drop your list. Like, comment, subscribe, man.
Smash that subscribe button.
That's right. For the sake of heaviness, thank you from Butch and from
Merciful Mike. Until
Merciful
next time.
Mike.